what a lot of marketers don't understand is data won't get you there. Data alone is not enough. I think the most powerful opportunity any marketer has is creativity. And I don't think enough marketers still understand that. And he taught me to write radio, and I went on to win a ton of awards. And it's actually one of my favorite mediums to write for, because you have no safety net. You have only words. But every time you grew, you needed more investment. You needed more capital. You needed a bigger brewing machine. You needed a bigger bottling line. You needed more glass. And it was just, we were underfunded, and we took on a partner, and we took on the wrong partner. That's when I started the Township Group. My tagline for my company was going to be, I'm tired of making ungrateful men rich.
I really appreciate your note in the pre-production work. And I'm glad we get to share that with everyone, that you felt like you were writing your own eulogy.
I really did. I mean, there were such deeply thought-provoking questions. I thought, man, I haven't thought about stuff like this, I think, ever. So I actually thought it was a really interesting journey to work on even just knowing the questions you were going to be asking that we're going to be talking about today.
Well, if we want to get even darker with it, I'm sure there's a joke in there that at one's funeral, they could just play the episode of the podcast.
That's right. I'll tuck it aside. I'll let everybody know.
That's the YouTube link. Just throw it up on the screen. Self-serve funerals. Here we go. Okay.
That's right. You got it.
Okay. Before we jump into it a little bit further, I know we're going to talk about your work with Can, but I have to ask you, the fact that you made it over there means that you found accommodation, because that was something that you weren't quiet about at all leading up to Can. So were you able to sort that? It was with Airbnb, Vrbo. It was one of those companies.
The Can debacle. I mean, housing in Can is always a bit of a crapshoot, but it was through Vrbo. And, about 2 weeks before we were slated to get on a plane, I had not heard from my host. I'd been sending a few questions. And I finally did get over, and she said, I don't have any reservation for you. We sold the property. So I talked to Vrbo.
Oh, I know.
Like my heart stopped. It's like 2 weeks I went on a plane. So I called Vrbo, talked about 300 different people. They found me alternate accommodations, but it was way the hell outside of Can. It would have had to be, coming in by, I don't even know what, a bus or something. And when I'm in Can, I'm working 16-hour days. I just you can't find cabs at night. You can't find Ubers at night. It just was unworkable. So I called them back and said, look, this isn't going to work for me. And by the way, I can't get old of this host either. They said, well, we're not sure how we feel about this. I found a place, someone canceled Airbnb. I suddenly found an Airbnb, said to Vrbo, I'm canceling. And they said, well, we're not sure we're going to waive that cancellation fee because you're canceling at the last minute. They said, we have to talk to the owner to see if he'll waive it. And I said, well, that's kind of the whole problem with the owner. So it all worked out, but it wasn't without, losing like 10 years off my life trying to get over there. I had visions of sleeping on a park bench.
Oh, God. And you even made like an AI image of yourself. Wasn't that when you were like holding up a sign? I remember seeing that on LinkedIn and in our email correspondence. But look, we're going to come back to your work at Can in a bit. But as always, we start from where you are right now. So you're the president and founder of the Township Group. So tell us what the Township Group is and what your role as founder and president entails.
What I did is I created the Township Group about 11 years ago because I saw a little bit of a sweet spot in the marketplace. And that was that really seasoned senior clients of small to medium-sized businesses really wanted direct access to senior wattage. But with the traditional agency offering, there's a lot of layers, there's a lot of expense involved in that. And often if you're a smaller player, you don't get to work with those really senior people. And I also was aware there were a ton of really talented people that were kind of without a job in their 50s. And it was the creme de la creme. So I created this virtual agency before there really was, pre-COVID, before there was a virtual agency. And I had this group of 25 to 30 plus people. And I bring them together I build a township around the client's needs, depending on what it is. Sometimes they just need a strategy, a muse. Sometimes they need a whole ad campaign. Sometimes for really big clients, what they're looking for is someone to help them find a bigger agency. So I do agency searches too. So wear many hats.
When I got the production notes, I was excited to see that you were an Etobicoke person born and raised. I live in Etobicoke, and I want to say I spent much of my childhood there too, because I had a lot of family. My father's from there. So take us through what life was like in Etobicoke, or maybe it was New Toronto? It was called...
No, it's the heartland of Etobicoke.
Heartland of Etobicoke.
I often describe it to people. My kids have just no concept of this. I feel like we lived this feral childhood. I mean, basically, your parents threw you out the front door and said, "I don't want to see you again. You're not getting in this house till the street lights come on." And those are the days when nobody had cell phones. Kids were, linked up by an AirTag. So you kind of were off doing whatever you wanted for the entire day, like building a tree fort. Who knows? Could be robbing a bank. They never knew. And you just showed up when the streetlights were on. So it was, in many ways, a childhood that I'm sure today nobody can even imagine. But I think it was incredibly creative because you were tethered to these screens. You had to make your own fun.
Yeah, I mean, if kids wanted to play soccer, it was in between cars or in between stones you throw on the street. Like you had to really work at occupying your time. I completely agree with that. Okay, I want to throw a couple of one landmark about Etobicoke. I want to throw that out to see if you're familiar with it, because New Toronto Fish and Chips.
I don't know it because it's south of me, right?
South of you, that's right.
Yeah. Like I know it now a little bit because I run in that area because I run down along the lake, but I don't know it from then.
Oh, it's I know it's changed hands a couple of times over the years, but if you're looking for like greasy soul food, where it's kind of funny. I wonder if they've changed this. I haven't been in a while, but they will wrap the fish and chips up in like newsprint paper and sell it that way. And it's kind of got a little bit of charm to it, but I can see people now, like a young person getting offended about how their food was served and throwing a TikTok video up and getting angry about it. But yeah. I
want to go directly there as soon as we're finished talking. I'm heading there. It sounds good to me.
That's right. I think it's on Birmingham Street. I always get it mixed up.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I know it. Yeah.
You know the area.
Yeah, down by the school, not too far from Humber College.
The
Lakeshore campus.
Which I like to remind people was the old Police Academy. Remember the Police Academy movies? Yep. That's where they filmed it there.
Yep.
The former, this might sound politically incorrect, but the former mental health hospital, which people seem to say that there's definitely some sort of haunting going on there with that, depending on where you are at that point. Okay.
It's just a beautiful building. It's gorgeous.
It is great what they've done with that campus, though. That's for sure. Humber's really renovated and turned it into something special.
Yeah.
But okay, I want to ask you, though, about your influences a little bit. Or sorry, no, I'm jumping ahead here. Let's talk a little bit about your hobbies, because you said something interesting. You said you were testing the patience of your parents, but your hobbies outside of that were drawing, reading, running, and cooking. Those don't sound like the hobbies or passions of someone who was simultaneously terrorizing their parents.
Well, it's fun to I was the oldest child. That was my job. I mean, I really did test the boundaries. I was, drinking underage, all the things one does as the oldest. But I always loved to draw. I mean, that's how I ended up in art college. I would spend hours drawing or building stuff. And I loved running. I think it's an offshoot of the energy. Like, I think the running and the cooking go really well together when I think about it, But reading, I'm a voracious reader. I don't have enough time to read now, but I just devour books, love reading. So those were kind of the big things.
Let's talk about your influences. Okay, jump into the right question in the right sequence right now. You say both of your parents for different reasons, but you also cite your maternal grandmother and some of your girlfriends. So let's start first with your maternal grandmother.
She is a person who believed in women's lib before it even had a name. She was a feminist before it had a title, which is she believed that you could do anything and would tell you that. If you want to be Prime Minister of Canada, you can do that. Anything you want to do, you can do. So don't let there be any barriers. And I love that. Her utter belief in, that you could accomplish anything you wanted to. And I would say to you that my parents were very instrumental when I was younger for two entirely different reasons. My father was very much a career man, and I loved that. He worked for the Toronto Star. He had this cool job. And I thought, that is for me. I want to be doing that kind of thing. But my mother and she lives with me, was so ahead of her time. She was a long distance runner and a yoga teacher back in the early 70s. She went vegetarian when I was 13 years old. I mean, she was doing all the things that everybody does now that are accepted, but they were so ahead of the curve that she used to run at night because people thought jogging was weird. So she really is, I admired that so much of it. She was well ahead of her time and continues to be.
So you saw a lot of what your maternal grandmother was imparting on you through your mother as well.
Yeah, I think so. I think they were, great role models for entirely different reasons. I think what I got from all three of them is the unshakable belief that they were in my corner no matter what.
That helps quite a bit.
I think it really does. I think it's really important to kids.
It is. And especially if you can kind of put up barriers so it doesn't make them reckless. Like they don't think that you're in their corner regardless of what happens, but it allows them to fail and try new things.
I agree. And I think that actually the one time I really did lose the faith of everybody, when I was in my mid-teens and I did get caught drinking underage. It wasn't great. And all three of them were not happy. But other than that blip, it all turned out okay.
What were you doing? Shots, beer?
No, I was doing anything I could.
Anything, that is the best
I think
answer.
lemon gin was involved.
Lemon. Okay. So was that with some of the girlfriends that you also cite as influences?
Yes, it was. It was with one of the girlfriends.
Okay. And you've also got one other influence. Speaking of influence, Terry O'Reilly. So he was a professional influence on you. And a lot of people listening or watching this would probably know him from hosting the Under the Influence podcast.
For sure. I got to know Terry. I first worked with his wife when I was at Cassette, but back in 1990 when he opened Pirate, I was their first client. And I had written an ad campaign for Bob Newhart, a radio campaign. And I was new to writing because the first 10 years of my career, I was an art director, and I switched at 10 years in to writing. And writing radio was very new to me. And I had really good ideas, but I actually didn't understand the craft of writing radio. And he was he had a way of teaching you without you realizing you were being taught. And he taught me to write radio. And I went on to win a ton of awards. And it's actually one of my favorite mediums to write for because you have no safety net. You have only words. And I like the way it really is theater of the mind. And it was watching how he direct talent taught me how to direct talent too. So he was very generous with his knowledge. And we just got along. Our spouses liked each other. It was a lot of fun. Our kids were similar ages. So I admire his writing and also just the way he looks at the world very much. So he was very instrumental in helping me learn to become a better writer.
I want to dive into his technique a little bit because correct me if I've got this wrong. You said that he was teaching you without you actually realizing you were being taught something. If I've got that right.
He was always so graceful he'd say, can I make a suggestion? We'd be going through the script together. I go, sure. He goes, I think it might be a little bit funnier if we flip this around because ... Or pause. We should always put a pause in. There's something really funny about a pause. So he taught me to write dialogue and it's hard to write dialogue, but he actually is thoughtfully deconstructs what makes something funny or what makes something a good piece of dialogue and was able to share that knowledge. And I was the happy recipient. So it worked out really well. And in terms of talent, he would lead by example in terms of directing, but he taught me very early that you just don't go running around saying to talent, do it like this and having them parrot you. That's just so insulting to someone who is an actor. So always he would be so careful about saying, what I'm looking for is this kind of a notion, this kind of a feeling, and leave it to the actor to deploy their craft. So I just felt like it was, every time I worked with him, it was a masterclass.
And let's talk about your first job, which is probably your first job in media as well. Did your dad have a hand in you becoming a delivery girl for the Toronto Star?
Yes. But it was very exciting. I wanted to be a paper girl. And it's funny because it's a job, again, the kids can't even imagine it. But 11 years old, I'm, picking up bundles of papers and delivering them to, 60 people. And I stayed with it for 4 years. And a big part, you're not only learning how to manage money, because those days you had to collect once a week for the papers. You were being sold papers by the Toronto Star that you were selling to your customers. So you learned that. But the other thing is they would have contests twice a year where you could win a ton of money and prizes. And I love that. So you'd be knocking on complete strangers' doors going, would you like to take the Toronto Star? But I think what it taught you is, to be brave, to be able to speak to people you didn't know, salesmanship, money management, taught you to be reliable because those papers had to be delivered at 4:00 every day. So it was, honestly, I feel like that's something that today's generation misses, is that kind of really profound responsibility at a young age. I think it's very formative.
And there's also a sales aspect to it as well. You're not because you had to go in and find your clients.
Well, then I didn't have to. Well, you would be doing it sometimes out of district. You'd be knocking on doors for anywhere, but you would get paid for bringing in a new subscriber for the Toronto Star. So it was great. And also on my own route, I expanded. I ended up with, on Saturdays, I'd be delivering 110 papers.
Oh, God.
But it was a great experience. Not so great in November. Wait a minute. Not so great in February.
Not so great in February. No, I used to deliver the Mississauga News. Did you have to put them together as well too, like the flyers and everything? Yeah, that was. Yep. I think that was.
I didn't like that.
That was the most painful part of it. It was very easy to unload a single paper on someone's doorstep and move on, but putting them together,
it was brutal.
Did you also have people that would complain continuously about like the paper wasn't on the right part of the porch or it wasn't in the mailbox properly? I remember once I had one woman, the Mississauga News, who was at a corner house. And you know how sometimes people's homes can they kind of face two streets? Like if you have a corner house, technically her address was on one street and I was on the other. And they kept calling and complaining that they weren't getting their paper over and over. And finally, the district manager actually finally took her address in because I was like, I don't know who's not getting their paper. And then he didn't really apologize, but it came to finally that I'm not supposed to deliver it. And so then it shifted to her coming after me on my route going, why aren't you delivering it? Why aren't you delivering it? And then they'd be like, but it's free. And I'm like, no, I get paid to deliver to each house. So I'm not giving you a free paper. Even though it's free for her, it's free labor for me.
Yeah.
I know the life back then. Now I don't even know what kids would be doing at that point because there are no papers to deliver, I guess.
Yeah, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Probably becoming influencers. That's what they'll be doing.
That's right. That's what it is.
Okay, so we already touched on the fact that you were a very creative person growing up, and you mentioned going to OCAD, Ontario College of Art and Design University. And so why did you pick OCAD and why did you study communication and design there?
I ended up going to an out-of-district school, high school, called Thistledown Collegiate, because they had an arts program. It was 2 periods a day for 4 years, and everything from art history to design to illustration to commercial art, and I loved it. But what I also did is I graduated after 4 years. Well, I ended up not going for a 5th year. Then there was a grade 13, but by the end of grade 12, I had a full portfolio, and I loved it. So I decided I was going to take a run at trying to get into OCA, and I knew it was really hard to get in. And figuring my fallback was going to be I was going to go into journalism or law, like completely contradictory,
completely different
professions. But I did end up getting accepted and loved it. And the first year at OCA, it was OCA then. It was mandatory. The courses that you took, they told you had to take design, 3D, this and that. But by second year, I had a class, and it was advertising for the first time, and it was with Terry Isles, who was one of the top art directors in this country. I mean, that was one of the big things about OCA was the instructors were people who were active in the business. And a number of the instructors in that program were award-winning art directors. And I fell in love with it because I just love the idea that you could solve a business problem through creativity. It was that perfect marriage of there's salesmanship involved, there's convincing people, and there's like this confluence of, business and creativity. So it just was exactly what I had been looking for.
You'd mentioned that you weren't introduced to advertising until second year. So going through your first year or even before starting at the school, what was the plan after graduation then? Had you not been exposed to advertising or gone that path?
Well, you don't know. That's why in first year, and it's true of a lot of universities, there's some mandatory courses they take. They want you to be across a bunch of stuff, just like a medical school. You got to do a bunch of stuff before you specialize to see what you have a feel for. And I will tell you, first year I thought, do I want to be a cartoonist? Do I want to be an illustrator? Do I want to be a package designer? Because I have love for all those things. But it was meeting that right teacher with that right course that basically changed my life. I was like, I love this more than all those other things which I like, and I'm glad I have some minor training, and it helps inform you as a creative director. Any kind of knowledge in any discipline helps. But it was meeting Terry Isles that was the pivot point.
And your first job after graduation, you were an art director, and it was at Hayhurst, and this was the precursor to Saatchi.
It was. Yeah, I was hired as a junior art director, and I worked in an office about this big, which is cool. It was so exciting to have an office. But I was partnered with this really senior, very senior writer. So I'm junior, he's so senior, and he had a bit of a drinking problem. So there'd be lots of, not getting the stuff done or not being there, or after lunch, it's like 3:00. Where's my partner? So I just started writing my own headlines. And that kind of continued to follow me into when I went on to Jerry Goodis, even though I was still an art director, I was writing headlines. And then I realized at a certain point, 10 years in, I thought, I spent a lot of time going to the writing first before I'm going to the visual solution. And the other thing that was, basically cold-eyed pragmatism, I realized by then that writers were paid far more than art directors were. And also, if you wanted to be a creative director, and I did want to be a creative director, you really had to be a writer. Often they were the lead in a business presentation. and they were just better paid. So for all those reasons, I knew that my ambition was to be a creative director. I knew I wanted to be paid well for my work, and that was the path to it. It was a weird kind of journey to get there.
It's strange that you mentioned that an art director makes less than a copywriter, simply because I'm thinking about like an art director, I'm thinking about artists in general. Like there is like an inherent talent there, and sure, you can teach it and refine it. But I feel like when it comes to like drawing or any form of visual art, you have to be born with the talent and then it has to be nurtured. Whereas it feels like when it comes to, again, not to be reductive about copywriting, that you can learn a little bit more, can be taught a little bit more.
It's a very interesting observation. I don't disagree with that. And I will tell you that in my years of being a creative director, art director, and a writer, I find that clients are very comfortable making copy changes because everyone can write. But they typically will leave the art director alone because a lot of times they don't understand the language of design and how their typography, all those good things. I don't know if it's still the same now, but it was the same. It was like that then. And it also was primarily men. I will say I was a real lone wolf because in Scally, I was the only woman in a pretty large creative department. And that was often the case. So it was sort of a double whammy, I think, I think because writers have a command of the word and they're often doing the presenting of the ideas, I think they were just inherently held in greater value, seen to be able to put them in front of a client. It's unfair and it's not true. I know lots of really articulate, wonderfully talented art directors, but it just was the way it was then.
Interesting the way you put it. It's like one leans more into leadership than potentially the other, or at least not necessarily leadership, but being able to like work a room and work a meeting. And that seems to lean more into copywriters than it does for, say, art directors or creative directors. And you continue this. Did this happen? And this happened at BBDO, or is this when you made the full pivot at BBDO and going right into writing versus from visual arts?
I left Scally as an art director, built my writer portfolio when I was there. I also had a pretty kind of wild male writer partner who that it was a good thing that I did as much writing as I did, but I put together a whole new portfolio when I was at Scally, and then I slid over to a former teacher was at BBDO. So that's when I made the leap. And I was willing, I kind of thought, well, I've had 10 years as an art director. I'm starting out as a writer. No doubt I'm going to take a pay cut. But his philosophy was, no, you've got 10 years of experience in the business. You know your way around a new business pitch. You know how to handle an assignment, how to hit the timelines, be on budget. So to me, you're not like a junior. So I actually got an uptick and I got a raise and I got the opportunity to sort of redefine my career, which was amazing to me.
I want to go back one step. It just kind of hit me. The colleague you had with the drinking problem that forced you to do a lot of the writing when he wasn't present. What made you do that versus, say, the other avenue many would take is they'd fold their arms, go into management and go, I can't work with him. He's not keeping up. We're missing deadlines. Like they would basically let the work fall apart and shift the blame to that colleague. What made you decide to do otherwise?
That's a really interesting question. I think because it was my first job out of college and I just didn't know what to do. So I just wanted to do great work. I had my foot in the door and I just wanted to do great work. And that seemed like the path to get it and to get there. And it's funny because he didn't love that, but we did some great work together. And then when I went on to work at Scally, I also had a partner who was, by the way, a great writer, but he had some mental health issues. And that also was a challenge. And I just, again, stepped into the void. I thought, we do some great stuff together, but I want more. So I just picked up the gauntlet. Seemed like the best path forward.
I wonder if it's because, like you said, that you were new to the industry, but because you were coming directly from OCAD, you were used to dealing with deadlines where you had instructors and professors who didn't care. If it was due Friday, it was due Friday. And you probably carried that mentality into the workforce.
It could be that, but it could also be that it was the apprenticeship model for writers. Like now Humber has a copywriting course, but there wasn't a copywriting course before. OCAD didn't have one.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was formally trained with 4 years of art direction and design and all that kind of stuff. But I like one of my partners used to be a cab driver. In fact, two of them were.
Really?
They came up through the business through a very different pathway. Yeah. It was more ad hoc.
You know what? That's what I miss too, because I've had some bosses that kind of came up through the mailroom. And it feels like
Yes.
you can't do that anymore. It feels like it's very rigid, and it doesn't have to be that rigid because you've got experiences coming from all avenues that you can leverage.
I still think it comes down to a great portfolio. I once hired a writer, brilliant guy, on just a funny mailer he sent me. It was one of the wittiest pieces, just a mailer. And I went, I got to talk to this guy. And he had a sparse portfolio, but he was a great writer. And so I still think there is a road in there. Still think there is a road in there that is less formal. But I'm glad that they have flanked it with formal training for those who want it. I don't think it's as I had 4 years of training, and I think it served me really well. And I was being taught by the best of the best in Canada, like top awarded people. I don't think you have a model like that anymore. Like OCAD's become a university, and people are writing a thesis to get out of there versus having an incredible portfolio and being trained to walk into a job. I also think that, Humber, I think they need more than the time they get learning to write. There's a lot more to it. So, you still walk into our business largely apprenticing, and you've got to have a creative director who is inherently understands that and will take the time to grow young talent.
Do you think OCAD evolving into a university and requiring people to write theses to graduate, depending on what avenue they're going in, do you think that was kind of an unfair response to, not an unfair, but a response to how unfair the market has been, where you look at a job description and like the top line is university degree required? And it doesn't even specify. I'll just say degree required. And it's like, what do you mean? Engineering, philosophy? Like, yeah.
I understood it to be a financial model, that if they were a university, they would get more funding.
Okay.
And what is very disappointing to me as someone who hired so many people, and I was a creative director 40 years. At one point, did they reach out to creative directors and say, what are you looking for in a candidate? When you hire someone, what are you looking for? Because I would have told them it's not a degree. It's talent. It's a portfolio. It's understanding the business, understanding how to dissect a strategy and come up with an idea that answered a strategy. Because that is what we do. There's objectives to our work. It's not just, I want a great painting.
I love the way you put that. Let's jump into your move to cassette. So here you were the creative communication group head. So what did that entail? Because it looks like you're starting to get really deep into like new business pitches and managing more people than direct creative.
Yeah, I was a creative group head, and that's sort of the path upwards towards being a creative director, which is instead of managing a whole department, the step up is you're managing a small group. So it gives you the opportunity to manage people, be responsible for their growth, hire and fire, give reviews, be responsible for the quality of their work. And so that was an opportunity I really wanted. I wanted it on a smaller scale because I knew I wanted to ultimately be a creative director. And it was also someone I very much wanted to work with. His name was Peter Lanyon. And because I was producing wonderful work. So I just wanted to be a part of that organization. And I wanted that particular opportunity to grow. Like I was very pragmatic about my path. I knew where I wanted to go and I had steps to get there. I wanted more television, for example. They had a lot of television clients. So that was, all those things contributed to that choice.
Is it easier writing for television than it is radio? Because I'd imagine radio would be a lot harder.
They're both hard. One's harder because you don't have as many tools at your disposal. I think you don't have visuals. However, you can also do things you couldn't do then with picture. Like you could, the common joke is you could drain Lake Erie if you wanted to pull the plug. Like you can do theater of the mind in a way. I mean, now shooting film, anything's possible, especially with the advent of AI. But I think radio's hard. It is the hardest. I think it's like the billboards are really tough if you're an art director. Radio's the toughest if you're a writer. There's no place to hide. You just have words.
Is there a radio jingle, or even just a piece of copy or a radio line? Maybe you created it, maybe someone else did, that just sticks out in your mind that you just can't shake?
A radio jingle?
Like I'll give you an example. Remember Fabricland?
Yeah.
Remember how theirs used to be Fabricland? And
oh my God.
Yeah, that's going to stick with you for the rest of the day. And I've been in meetings where I've been pitching like digital audio and people will be like, oh, audio, whatever. And there will be people that remember Fabricland and those jingles and I'll drop it. And usually be about 2 or 3 people will be like, I can't shake that. I know exactly what you're talking about now.
I used to love I just like the writerliness of the Budweiser commercials that have been done over the years. Talking about, oh my God, I'm drawing a complete blank, but there's been some great work on Budweiser over the years. There's some great campaigns out of the States for 9X. Make haste to the forest. It's just crazy stuff. But I like kind of use of unexpected words. I think it kind of like humor, and I like unexpected words. I think it kind of stops you. Go like, what was that I just heard?
Do you remember the Pizzaville radio ad then?
Oh God, yes. I think we're all.
Are we going to say 3636? That one? Yep. And then they have to correct you and say it's 3636, not free sex, free sex.
Free sex. 967-1111, right?
Yep. There's another one as well too. I'm surprised the
Absolutely.
Pizzaville one actually made it by the censors.
Yeah.
But
it was a rainy day. Yeah. Whatever happened to that? I haven't heard one of those forever. That campaign was around for 20 plus years.
Yes, it was a great campaign. Okay, so as you started to move up the ladder and your responsibilities shifted to more of a leadership position, was it hard for you to relinquish some of the creative duties that you had? And I like to ask people this because, especially if you're on the creative side, a lot of the stuff that you do in school, you're doing at more of an entry level, like being on set, doing a lot of the creative development. And I've found, speaking to other creatives, that sometimes they're a little lost when they move up because they're like, my life is now spreadsheets and, like you said, hiring and firing people, and maybe looking at the P&L and not so much getting into the weeds and all the persuasive techniques that I've accumulated and all that experience over the years.
I liked moving up a level. I love strategy, and I love having to think at that higher level. And I also love being in new business pitches. Stuff like that it's performative. So I like that kind of stuff. The budget stuff, I didn't mind it actually. I feel like the hard part was sometimes for teams working for me, if it was a very big budget thing, like a big television shoot, clients want the creative director there and they want us to talk to the creative director. And sometimes that didn't help the younger teams grow. But for the most part, I try to step back. I like it when someone else is doing other stuff. And I sort of feel like it makes me proud when I watch a young team do something, wins an award. I remember our team did stuff that got in a can, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was really proud of them. And because you're a part of that. So relinquishing is okay. I was okay with that because there's other things you do that you wouldn't be doing otherwise. I'm not on a set worrying about the sound and making the enunciation of that word. I'm more concerned with the client and where they're driving their business, and can I help them do that?
Let's talk about Cannes right now. So take us through when you discovered what Cannes was, because just from talking to you, it sounds like it's your kind of Olympics. Like you look forward to this moment every year.
I do, because I feel like it recharges my creative batteries. I feel like when I went to Cannes in 2013 as a judge for Canada. And you get to be chosen as a judge if you've won a lot of awards. Particularly, you have to have won a Cannes in order to judge a Cannes. It's a very wild experience because I call it the Olympics of creativity. Because that year there were 20,000 people that attended from 100 countries, and
Wow.
my jury was 31 people from right around the world. And it was an incredible experience to go through and look at the best work from around the world, like hundreds of examples, and talk with your peers about what made it good, what made it extraordinary, why some ideas were here and some ideas weren't. And it was a life-changing experience. I felt like there's so much great learning over here that helped. I think it helped me be better. I think it helped all Canadians be better. So I came back just determined to pack my experience into like a 1-hour presentation for my clients. So I kind of said, here's stuff that's going on around the world that you may not know about that I think is really important for you in the year ahead to help you be the best you can be, to be globally competitive, not just Toronto competitive, really compete on the world stage. And that blossomed into something I do now for many clients. I speak across North America and I bring back the learning from Cannes, because it's not just, this is a great campaign, it won. A lot of times there's cultural nuances that inform it, or there's a sea change in social moments, or technology really informs a shift. And I think we sometimes in Canada don't look beyond the edge of our laptop. We don't make a time in the space to kind of really sit back and kind of go, what will inspire me? What can inform me? How can I be better? What's the learning? And so it really did change me. And I was determined no matter what, I would go back every year, and I have ever since then. But the wonderful thing was being asked onto the advisory board. So now I go back with the advisory board. And it's really cool because you get to peek behind the curtain. I get to talk to our jury members and say, I think I'm seeing this. Are you seeing this? What are you seeing in the jury rooms? What are the discussions like? So our role is to champion Canadian creativity on the world stage. We help pick the jury members that go over. But I also train young lions to go over and compete for Canada. I also train our judges to be comfortable in the jury room and understand what their role is. So it's really kind of been, it started one place, it's in a really different place now. But I think the underlying thing is there's a passion for creativity. I can see how it can solve not just business problems, it's solving social problems. Like, it's a really complicated time out there. And I go to Canada and see what they're doing to solve things like breast cancer and create awareness about climate change. And I come back having hope.
Okay, so let me ask you about the recent Can then. What impressed you the most from Team Canada, and what impressed you most from the other participants?
What impressed me most about Canada as a country is we are small, but we are mighty. We really punch above our weight creatively. Typically, we're in the top 5 for most awards won. And you remember, 100 countries are competing. And we're competing against people like the US, Brazil, UK, and France, and that says a lot. That, like, last year, we were top 3 for most awards won. So I think there's something it says something really cool about Canadians in that we don't get the budgets other people do, but I think we think smarter than other countries do. And so that makes me really proud. And also, we have this beautiful suite of indies. We have all these beautiful indie agencies like the Rethinks of the world that are just doing remarkable work on a global scale, and it makes me very proud to be Canadian.
And then on the global scale, what impressed you? Like, was there a particular campaign that came from another country that you said, "Ooh, I wish Canada had thought of that," or "I wish I had thought of that"?
I don't think I decode things that way because there's lots of impressive campaigns. There's brands that inherently show up every year after year after year with really smart, thoughtful work. Certainly, Apple is one of them. Burger King went on a real roar. McDonald's used to. They're kind of bit more hit and missy. I think what I see that I find interesting are what I would call is emerging trends that really attach themselves to culture and social moments. Like, I'm seeing this tremendous, I call it the new nostalgia, but I'm seeing so many brands around the world using, analog or retro cues, like music from the 80s, and even a look and feel cinematically that looks like an 80s or an idea. Like, one of these things was a parody of 1987. Remember the old telethons, like the Jerry Lewis telethons?
Oh, I remember those very much. Yeah.
Yeah. It was Doritos did a parody of one of those. And that was, it's amazing to me. I guess what I'm feeling like is things are so unstable right now that people are looking backwards. Brands are looking backwards in order to move their business forwards. And that's what people are looking for. So I found that very interesting. It certainly is one of the key trends. I think the other thing I see is, last year, I didn't think the work was as good at Cannes. I think everybody was so obsessed with AI and, was it going to annihilate humanity? Elon Musk didn't help when he came and said, there's an 11 to 20% chance we'll be annihilated. But I want to be there to see it. I thought, that's not helping things, Elon. Because, they have all these speakers there, like these top celebrities and thinkers and stuff like that. But I think this year we kind of got over that and we realized that, AI can be a very powerful tool, but it's like the plumbing. It isn't going to take our jobs in terms of finding human insight and coming up with great ideas. So I think the work was stronger this year, but I saw them using AI to help propel a good idea further. And that made me happy to see that shift globally. But I do see brands really calling out, hey, this was made by a human being, like Apple when they did their new logo. Or, I don't know if you follow the Washington Post, their podcast, it says read by a human. Because
I've seen that elsewhere. Yeah,
yes,
I've seen that elsewhere.
People are really flagging the human hands-on crafted experience. So that whole hanging on to humanness is really become a very big thing. And again, I find that interesting and I think it's important and good.
Let's talk about your work mentoring the young lions as well. So you're meeting someone who's going to their very first Can. They're relatively new to the industry. How does that mentorship process start with them? Like, do they come to you with the idea and then you're kind of doing what, I forget the name of, it was Terry O'Reilly, like kind of like what Terry O'Reilly did. Like, you're letting them just do their thing and then coming in with light suggestions to kind of guide them, or are you a little bit more hands-on?
No, it's more formal now. The Globe and Mail is our, patron saint of creativity in this country. The board that I sit on, the Cannes Advisory Board, is headed by the Globe and Mail, and they're Cannes Canadian representative, year 21 now. So they are the ones that run this program. And what happens is these young lions are given a project, they're given a brief, and they have 24 hours to solve it. And there's 6 different teams. One's a direct team, one's an advertising team, one's a marketing team. We have a media team. We have a film team, and they have 20, if it's film, they have 48 hours, but everyone else gets 24 hours. They have to submit their ideas, and then we judge them. There's a jury of us. And so I judged digital this year with my partner in crime, Sabah Kwa, who's fantastic. And the team that wins, and I think we had 70 submissions this year. The winning team comes into the Globe and Mail. We host a lunch, and we host a day, like a workshop with them. And prepare them so they understand what it's going to be like over there competing. We have young lions who competed before come back and join in and say, here's what I learned. Here's what I think you need to know. So it's really like a very hard, we call it our boot camp. And then once we get over there, we're there for them to help them. But when they're in working on their submission, they're doing their own thing. All we can do is prepare them for it and have them understand how to, basically parse out their time in a meaningful way, how to make the most of Cannes when they're there, once they finish competing.
Let's jump back into your career path a bit. Due North Communications, this was your first SVP role. What was that like?
It was great because it was a chance, again, always being mindful of that next step up. I wanted to have the opportunity to help run an agency, be responsible for the agency's growth, be responsible for client growth, new business, growing the creative reputation of an agency. So that was that opportunity. At Cassette, I had topped out as a creative group head. They'd brought in a new creative director who kind of made it known that he considered me a threat. I wasn't, but that's okay. You know what? Because one door closes, another door opens. So I took this opportunity at Due North, and it was one of my best experiences in my career. I stayed there for 14 years. The gentleman who started, his name is Mark Weisbarth, was a fantastic boss. He helped me grow into being a creative director. I made a couple of bad wrong turns on the budget. He's like, no, that's not how this works. But also the head of account services, she became eventually the president of Due North, is Jill King, who now runs the Ontario government contracts, advertising contracts. She was my partner in crime. So we had each other. And, we worked side by side growing the agency. And, so I wasn't in splendid isolation. I had a good confidant person to help me be better, be my best self, if you will, improvement, figure out the job, figure out how to be good at it. So it was great.
Was this back when the agency was on the Esplanade?
It was. Great location too, right?
It's a great location right next to Union Station. Lots of great restaurants around there.
Yeah.
But also during this time, could we call this a side hustle? Because it's weird calling a brewing company or a brewery a side hustle, but you co-founded Cameron's Brewing Company with your family. So where did that idea manifest from? Like, someone must have been a brewmaster or an amateur brewmaster in the family for this to start.
Yeah, my brother has always brewed beer all his life. And what happened was he got a golden handshake from a job he had. It was a good one. And he had always wanted to start a microbrewery. So he came to my mom, me, my husband, said, are you interested in jumping in? And so we decided that we were. And I would do all the marketing, do the package design. My husband would do sales. He also helped build the brewery. My brother was the brewmaster. And my mom just basically tried to herd us all in the right direction. She was in charge of logistics. And coming out of the gate, we wanted to be very different. So instead of doing a 6-pack, we did a 9-pack. Every 9-pack was hand signed by Cameron, my brother. That's why it's called Cameron's Brewing Company, because he's the Cameron. And there was a personal touch sheet thing, but it was cachet. It was premium. There'd never been a 9-pack before. So it was a really great experience. To create something from the ground up was very hard. LCBO has a lot of rules. Just starting a brewery is very difficult. And it was hard because our kids were little and we were wearing 225 different hats, so it was, juggling became your middle name. So it was a lot of juggling. And it was, I won't lie, it was a big challenge, but it was, possibly I thought of it as, could it be the plan after advertising? Like, is this where we go from here? So it was sort of a long-term plan at the same time. But the first year we opened the brewery, we won what's called the Beer Cup. And that's like the Olympics of beer, if you will. So we got a gold at that. So that was a great start.
What happened with the brewery after? Like, did you move off of that? Did you sell it? Like, because you said it was supposed to be the life plan or possibly the plan for the future.
A couple things happened. We opened a craft brewery at the time when, there were very few of them, but then they exploded. And one of the big things that was a really good opportunity for us was the LCBO used to be closed on Sundays and microbreweries could be open because they produced the product. But then the laws changed about a year after we were doing the brewery. And then what happened is we did really well in terms of winning awards and sales. But the problem was every time we won, like my husband, I remember 1 week before Christmas came, it brought in 11 new accounts. It was crazy. But every time you grew, you needed more investment. You needed more capital. You needed a bigger brewing machine. You needed a bigger bottling line. You needed more glass. And it was just, we were underfunded and we took on a partner and we took on the wrong partner. And it eventually became untenable. So we opted out. We decided to sell. And it was a heartbreaking thing because we put so many years into it. And it was hopefully going to be that, we were going to be the next Molson's. However, it did not work out that way, but it's still a great experience.
I remember there was this sort of period where microbrewers were being bought by the big breweries. And it was kind of like, I guess you could sort of say that almost like tech startups, how they keep getting bought by the big tech companies. It felt like the big breweries would see a threat from a microbrewer and then they'd come in and scoop them up.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, when we were looking to sell, the money that we were talking about with our partner who we sold to wasn't where we thought it should be. So I went and met with Amsterdam Brewing and said, we're kind of interested in talking. And so we started talking money with them. And that helped me kind of get us where we needed to be to get out of there. But you're right. There was that evolution going on that the big breweries were buying the craft breweries left, right, and center. And but it's funny because it was such a niche then. And because this was back in, it was 97. I think it was 97. Yeah, it was 97 when we started. There weren't very many of them then. But now there's an explosion of craft brewers everywhere.
It's funny how it's kind of flipped from a branding perspective. Like I remember in the 90s too, it was like Molson Canadian, Molson X, Labatt Blue. And now it seems like everyone else stays away from that. And they like telling the story behind why they're drinking this beer you've never heard of from this brewery that you've never heard of as well too.
Well, it's funny you should mention that because one of the things I was looking at was an article about craft brewers down in the States. Now, what they're going is really retro with their packaging. Instead of these crazy kind of like flying monkeys or whatever, they're taking it very retro. So it looks like a beer your grandfather used to drink, like the old O'Keefe ale, Carling O'Keefe or something like that. And so again, there's the nostalgia going on there too.
You were doing this simultaneously while you were at Due North, right? So that you, like I said, you were wearing what did you learn about yourself or what skills did you acquire or how did you grow personally and professionally while doing the brewery that transferred over to your work at the agency?
I will tell you that the skill I have two things. I can juggle. I really can. I can word multitasking. I don't know if there's a multitasking on steroids. I'm able to do that. Partially it's because I just don't sleep. I'm up at 5 a.m. I find it interesting to do a bunch of different things at once. So, I learned that I really can do that. And, it's really put it to the test for sure. I think the other thing, that I learned is how hard it is to start a business. I understood what, the kind of money you need to have to do different kinds of business, that kind of overhead that we needed for that brewery. And we'd be awake nights thinking about glass, how to, finance the next, the shipment of glass bottles that we needed. It was an extraordinary experience, but I think it was the biggest thing is it taught me how to juggle.
Due North eventually evolves into One Advertising. How does the agency, where did the change come from? How did it change and how did that impact you?
The change came from Mark Weisbarth wanted out. He was ready to retire. He's retired young. He retired very young, but he I think it was the staring at the ceiling every night thinking, how do you make payroll? I mean, that's the thing. Every business owner has on the monkey on their back. And, he was ready to go and he sold it to a couple of folks. And, it fundamentally changed what was a fabulous agency with a lot of really happy clients. It was growing exponentially into a very dysfunctional place. It was sad to see.
And you found that even at a senior level, you just couldn't keep your hands on everything. Like you couldn't keep it together.
Especially at a senior level. I think that you know, when there's a new sheriff in town, you know, I think that I've never understood this, that people buy an agency because of this incredible brand, the client roster and the work they're doing, and that people, you know, the senior management's loved, and then they immediately start pulling apart what was the winning formula. So I didn't understand that. But I also there was a lot of, I think there was kind of two things at play, that I think there was some ageism, and I also think there was some sexism. I mean, at one point, there was talk of, would I dye my hair? It's like, no.
What?
I'm not dyeing my hair.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't directly, came through a side channel. It's like, she's got to dye her hair. It's like, no. You know, in fact, I will never dye my hair. Silver is a badge of honor as far as I'm concerned. So anyways, it fell apart. We had one of the owners, one of the new buyers, had a substance abuse issue, which seemed to be a recurring theme in this business. I realized that as we're talking about it.
It is.
And anger management issues. And it just wasn't a happy place anymore. So a couple of years into it, I went, no, I'm not doing this anymore. So.
See, I agree with everything you said there. I've seen it as well, too, in the industry, substance abuse issues, anger management issues. Not that I'm saying I think those are great things, but I feel in some cases the pendulum has swung so far in the other direction that even if you constructively voice an opposing opinion, it's now considered angry. That's just been my personal experience.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that.
I'd like it to swing back into the middle where there's a bit of nuance, where people can say, okay, it's constructive and it's productive and professional. And being able to differentiate that.
You got to be able to have a healthy discourse if you don't agree. It's so funny, though. I remember when I started, that's when I started the Township group. My tagline for my company was going to be, I'm tired of making ungrateful men rich.
Oh, but, that's a great tagline.
But it's a little too long.
Hard to fit on a business card. So while all of this is going down at one, is this when you're starting to think of the Township group? Like, what was that moment where you said, I've got to take way more authorship over my career going forward? And by the way, did being co-owner of the brewery actually help with that? Because this was technically your second go at entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think it did. But it made me also be very wary of the idea of having huge overhead. I didn't want to have a building. I didn't want to have to worry about having staff, having people on staff. I wanted to have more flex than the traditional agency structure could offer. So it really was very timely. I was just sort of fed up with it, and had an idea of a different offering that could work. And so it was just a great confluence. And not wanting to dye my hair. It was all those things. All those things.
Again, it's you taking authorship of yourself and your career from top to bottom. But let's talk about the name of the company, because you got an interesting story about how it came about. Yeah,
it was funny. I was doing my last shoot for Due North, coming back from Vancouver, and I was sitting with a couple of friends in the lounge, Air Canada lounge, and we were sort of toasting our last job together. And I hadn't yet thought of the name of the company. I was bouncing around a few ideas, and a friend of mine, John Pace, said, I don't know why I don't call it the Township. Like, I think that'd be really cool. Like, it just feels like you've got enough hominess to it, enough of critical mass. And we started talking about the idea of that you could basically build, you want some flex. Like, some clients want some things, they want to just, as I said, strategy. Sometimes people just want a logo. Sometimes someone wants an entire ad campaign or a strategic game plan for the next 5 years. And the idea that you could build that flex, that you could build a township of need around whatever it was their need was. It could be 2 people or it could be 15 people, depending on what they needed. And we sort of mapped out that whole idea together, sitting in that lounge that day.
And what does the company look like now versus day one?
That I think there's a lot more. Well, I guess I was just starting out, so there's a lot of scrambling. I think that to establish myself as being this, not that, I think that was the scary thing at the beginning, is saying I'm doing this myself, and I've got this idea, and I had a former client of mine from Due North took the first leap of faith with me. Now I think the big thing now is I have that reputation out there. I've got enough critical mass. I've worked with enough big clients over the years that I'm a known entity. And I wasn't then. I was never seen as that person doing that thing. So I think that the biggest thing is reputational. and having some victories behind you. But also, I think the thing I do now that is really different is I do a lot of public speaking in a lot of different places to a lot of different audiences. Sometimes it's, it can be charitable organizations, or it can be like the American Automobile Association, or it can be, groups of marketers. And it does two things. I think it allows me to share my learning, my global learning. It establishes me as a global thinker. But it also is a revenue model for me, in that often I'll have someone come to me afterwards and say, I saw you speak. I have an issue I'm trying to map out my agency. Can you come and talk to me? Do you think we can figure this out? Or a client will come to me and say, I'm looking for someone, or can you help me with this? So it's really, I didn't have that then. So, it's having that critical mass of that experience, that body of experience. And also I think my work with the CAN Advisory Board has been really helpful, because even if you don't know me by name, you know what CAN is, CAN Lion is, and you can check out my involvement with it. So I think that a lot of things have come together in a really fabulous way that I didn't have 10 years ago that I now have.
What would you say to a group of marketers? Like, let's say they've hired you to speak at an event. What do you say to a group of marketers versus, say, you mentioned you were doing work with, I think, AAA?
Yeah, I did American Automobile Association and Canadian Automobile Association. I've spoke with them too at their annual general meetings. What I talk about is that I think what a lot of marketers don't understand is data won't get you there. Data alone is not enough. I think the most powerful opportunity any marketer has is creativity. And I don't think enough marketers still understand that. And so what I like to do is kind of go, here's a business problem this brand had, and here's how they solved it. That was creative. That was a creative solution. It was a creative strategy or creative idea, and really help them to understand, to pave a way for them to understand that creativity is not an expense. It is a must have if you want to survive, and if you want to grow and evolve as a brand or as an organization. It's the best thing you can have. It's the most powerful thing you can have.
So it's like data identifies the problem, but it's creativity that's going to show you how, or at least show the consumer how you can solve it.
Creative solves the problem. One of the speeches I just did, I'm going to be out in Halifax in the fall, but I was just in Calgary, was kill it with creativity. Data alone is not enough. And here's why. Here's what you need to know. So it's not enough I just don't want to go around saying that's not very effective. I want to go, it doesn't work, but when you do this, it does work. Like they can hold hands. It's really important. But I think that creativity is still undervalued.
And Karen, if anyone listening or watching this wants to learn more about the Township Group, what's the best way they can do that?
One of two places. They can go to townshipgroup.com, or they can go to karenhowe.ca, which is my speaking website. So if you want to book me for a keynote, I'd be thrilled to be there and share the knowledge.
And if you found Karen on this podcast, be sure to let her know that you found her on the Media People podcast. So I'm going to put both of those URLs up at the bottom of the screen so people can grab that. And we're going to bring it home with rapid fire questions.
Okay.
All right. The campaign or body of work you're most proud of?
It would be two. One would be the dot spots, which I did for the dairy farmers of Canada. They were done years ago. They were 5-second television commercials. We made 183 of them. We were trying to make milk cool for teens, and we did. And we did that because we knew they were really bored easily. And so that was at a time when there was never 5-second television commercials on air. So that was cool because it broke the boundaries from a media standpoint. And to be able to make milk cool for kids was incredible. It was exciting. And do 183 commercials. And then I think the second one, I have to go back to radio, which is I wrote a radio campaign for Bell Mobility years ago for Bob Newhart. And it was one end of a phone call, him calling someone on a cell phone, and a problem was ensuing. In one case, he was a painter and he'd painted the wrong house entirely the wrong colors, like aubergine and canary yellow. And I just, both campaigns won a lot of awards, but they built business, and they were joyful. They were joyful to create.
Your favorite movie?
Oh, anything by Christopher Guest. I love Christopher Guest. Probably Waiting for Guffman's right up there.
If Hollywood were to make a movie based on your life story, who would you want to play you?
Julia Louis-Dreyfus.
And my follow-up, if Hollywood were to make this movie, what would you call it?
Oh my God. What fresh hell? No, I would call it, I would call it a high wire act. I was thinking juggling, but I went, no, high wire act. I think that's what I'd call it.
Your favorite book?
Was Catch-22 for the longest time until I read When Breath Becomes Air. Beautiful book. Profound.
Your favorite song?
A Lovely Day by Bill Withers. I've always loved that song, but it was cemented for me when it became one of the first songs that was played at my son's wedding when he got married 2 years ago.
The best advice you have ever received?
Get a dog? No.
I was going to say, that's great advice.
Yeah, okay, you want versus life advice. I think that what I believe in yourself. I think that I think people are, particularly Canadians and particularly women, are not good about championing themselves, and they wait for someone to cast their eyes upon them and find their brilliance. No, I think you need to champion yourself and believe in yourself, and I think that's important.
If you could go back in time and give your younger self advice, what would you say?
That is the advice I think I'd give my younger self. Exactly that. I think that I sometimes would stand in the shadows and wait for someone to figure out that I had something to offer instead of I think men typically are better about that. Saying, seizing something versus saying, am I ready yet? I think I learned that midway through my career. I wish I just learned it a little bit earlier to kind of go after what you really want. And you know what? Ambition is not a dirty word.
No, it's not.
It's great. I love ambition.
And my signature closing question, if you weren't in media marketing, what would you be doing and why?
I would want to be a food critic, and preferably for the New York Times. Love that. I love to cook. I've been working on getting my sommelier accreditation, and I love food and I love wine. And I love writing. There's a confluence of all my 3 favorite things.
And we're going to end things right here. Karen Howe, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you very much for having me. It's great talking to you.